So today's video is going to be a bit different. This PC build belongs to our client, and there is a specific problem that is occurring with it. Whenever the client heats this motherboard with a heat gun, the PC starts up. Basically, the problem is something related to the motherboard's VRM section. After running like this for a while, the PC is now completely dead. The motherboard isn't working anymore. And there's another problem. Initially, there were issues with booting, and another issue was with the power supply. Whenever the client tried to install games on their hard disk, installation process was failing. It was due to an inconsistent power in SATA power cables, and power supply was failing. This is VP500 PC power supply from Antec, as you can see. So we're going to replace these two components, power supply and the motherboard, to fix it. We'll build it from scratch again. If we look at it, this will basically be a PC build from scratch. If you want to see the whole process, you can watch the entire video. You can learn how to build an AMD-based PC in this video, and I will be replacing these two components and then returning this working PC to our client. The only things we are replacing are power supply and the motherboard. This motherboard is from Gigabyte, and our client has been using the Rx570M. So we will change this, and the components we will take will include the main processor, which is already working and is located under this fan, and one will be NVMe storage from Adata. This is the hard disk from WD Green with 1 TB of capacity, and we will use these as our client have some important data and games stored in it. The main thing is that we will keep the same cabinet. We won't change the cabinet. This cabinet is coming from Ant Sports, as you can see. So basically, we are going to build this from scratch, changing the two components, the motherboard and the power supply, and fixing it all up new. So first, I will remove the processor from motherboard and clean the cabinet a bit, and then we will proceed with the build process.
A few moments later.
So right now we're going to assemble this, and you can see that we are using the Asus A520M motherboard. You might be thinking that this is a downgrade, since it already had a mid-tier Gigabyte Rx570 motherboard before, and this A520 is a more basic board. It will be downgrade, but let me explain that our client had a limited budget, and because of that, we had to go with this motherboard. Also, the client doesn't really do any tweaking or overclocking, they just use it for basic purposes. Before, the B450 had features for overclocking, tweaking, etc. But our client had a limited budget and did not engage in overclocking. Therefore, we opted for this budget-friendly motherboard. We have decided to install this, and as for the power supply, you can see that our power supply is indeed better than before, the one from Antec. This time, as you can see, we have the Deepcool PK550D, which is an 80+ power supply. It comes with a black flat cable, so basically, our power supply is being upgraded, but our motherboard remains the same. It will come with a low-end motherboard that fits the customer's budget, but it will work just fine. Once it is fixed properly, let's proceed to assemble it and see how it is done. So once again, let's go through the components in detail that you can see on our desk right now. We have 2 sticks of RAM, Gskil Ripjaws, each 16 GB, running at 3200 MHz, and a 256GB NVMe SSD from Adata, which you can see here. We will use the existing 16GB RAM from our previous working setup, along with a 256GB SSD from Adata. And our main processor is the Ryzen 5 3500, which we will also be using along with the stock cooler. A couple of other things. We also have this WD 1 TB drive from our previous build and AMD Rx570 GPU. We will use this for display output, and so. As you know, the Ryzen 5 3500 don't have integrated GPU, so we will need to use a dedicated GPU for the display output. These are the 2 more components that we are using from previous build. So these are some components and the cabinet that were already working in our existing build. As I mentioned in the intro, you already know that we will be using a new motherboard and power supply because there was an issue with the old one. Now, we will build this from scratch. So that was the introduction to the components. Now, let's set them aside and start building. So let's quickly open the box of our motherboard and take out the motherboard first. So right now, this is our motherboard. First, we will install our processor in it. Before installing the processor on the motherboard, you should first look at the board to see that there is an arrow. So you can see here on the board that I will first show you the CPU. You will see an arrow either on the top side or the bottom side of the CPU. Here, you can see the arrow on the bottom side of the CPU. And when you match it with the board, you'll also see an arrow on the board. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see that there is an arrow. And you will need to match the arrow to install the CPU. So gently lift this mechanism, align the slots with the arrow to install the CPU, and then press it down firmly. Our CPU has been installed. Now, we will install RAM. To install the RAM, we need to open the side slot. Sometimes on some boards there are slots on both sides, and on some there's only one side, so you need to open the slots on both sides and then install one end. You can install it in the RAM slots. Do you see these notches? There will also be a notch on this component, so you need to match it with that. Bottom, you can also see it in this. If it is at the bottom, you need to align it with that. If you try to install it this way, it won't work, so you need to insert it into the slot like this. Once the RAM is properly inserted, you will hear a click sound. Along with this, you can see that the one you have installed can be done in the same way for the other one by placing it in the slot. And again, once RAM stick properly inserted, you will hear a click sound. Now we will install the NVMe storage. To install it, you can see the slot here, so we will install it here. For this, we will have to secure it now. To secure this, you will find a screw and a standoff in the contents inside the box of motherboard, which you will need. The size of the SSD varies. You need to fit it according to the size of your SSD and secure it with the standoff and screw. Now you can see, you will need to attach the standoff. We need to put the standoff in place. Let's do it first. Now we will install the SSD here and we'll tighten it with the screw. Now most of components have already installed on the motherboard. Now it's our cooler's turn. We need to install this cooler. However, I am specifically explaining this part for the stock cooler. First, you need to remove these brackets. You have to remove both brackets. Only then will you be able to install your cooler. So let's quickly take out these brackets. As you can see, brackets have been moved. Now you can see that there is a plate at the back where your cooler fits. So keep this plate aligned with the hole. Also, before we install the cooler, let's apply a little paste. For this, I am using Gelid's GC4. So now, let's put a little bit on this. A small amount is sufficient. Now, when you install the AMD cooler, always remember that the AMD logo should be on the side of the motherboard, where the I/O shield and I/O ports are located. And now we will tighten every screw, one by one, in opposite direction, not clockwise. You will have to do this slowly and gradually. Don't tighten any screw at once, do it one by one. Just tighten every screws little bit. You need to do this gradually and in the opposite direction. You can see that you don't need to tighten it too much. Just do it gradually, one by one. So, now you can see our stock cooler has been installed. Now we plug in the fan plug. Generally, the plug for your CPU fan is located at the top section of board. So you can see it here. Let me try to show you. You will see a small label that says CPU fan, so you need to install it here. Let's go ahead and install the cable for our CPU fan. And while installing, there's a slot in this too, so you need to pay attention to that. Make sure it is in line with the slot. So, you can see now the build process is now partially completed. The RAM, SSD, and our processor have been installed. We can try testing it like this. You can see that I can lift up the board by simply holding the fan. And now we will shift it into the cabinet. So let's head over to the cabinet. Now what we have here is this side that you can see. This side here is our back side, and this is the front. So basically, as you might know, the port side goes to back side of cabinet. Before installing the motherboard, the first thing you need to do is install motherboard's I/O shield. To install the I/O shield, always remember that the I/O shield must be attached from the inside. You cannot attach it from the back. It must always be attached from the inside. And for the direction, you can see that your board will always be installed in this direction. The fan side will always be on the top. So as you can see, when we install motherboard, and this way, so you can match it like this, you need to install the I/O shield in this specific direction. Whenever you install the I/O shield, you will hear a click sound when it is properly seated. Now we do one more thing. You can see we have some cables coming from the back, so we'll do one thing. We will remove the back panel of our cabinet. So we will move the cables to the back side first. When we install the motherboard into the cabinet, you can see that there are some screw mounting standoffs here that you will need to remove first. So first, let's align the motherboard a bit and check if the screw positions match the holes. Let's check it once. So here, most of the screw holes are matching up, but there's one screw hole for one standoff that isn't matching, so we'll change the location of that. Once the holes of the remaining screws are aligning, we will remove this standoff and move it to correct position. Now we have a total of 6 screws for our motherboard. 1, 2, 3, 4. So all 6 positions are still there. Now we will directly place it like this. But before that, we face a problem here regarding the power supply cables, as you can see here. You will need to connect 8-pin CPU connector here, and you will need to pull those cables from here, which might be a bit difficult for you. The 24-pin will come out easily from here, but this one will be difficult to get out from this hole. In some cabinets, this task is easy. After installing the motherboard, you can easily route the cables from the back, but in this case, in this cabinet, the hole at the top will not allow the CPU's 8-pin power cable to come out easily. If you've already installed the motherboard, you need to keep this in mind. First, let's install the power supply. After that, we will install the motherboard. Now we will install the power supply. Before installing, we will turn it to back. Let's quickly install our power supply first. You will need these screws that comes with power supply to tighten it with cabinet. Before that, one thing to note is that you can see the air intake here. This fan essentially takes in fresh air from here, blows it out. So you need to ensure that your cabinet has an intake at the bottom side as well. If there is an intake, you definitely need to keep the fan facing down. If there is no intake ventilation at the bottom, and it is at the top, you definitely need to adjust the direction accordingly. You will need to place it upwards like this for the cabinet. In our case, there is no ventilation at the top, there is ventilation at the bottom. And if you have ventilation at the bottom, it's better because it will directly take in fresh air. So let's install this first. While installing, you need to match the holes perfectly. So you can see, this has been installed. And first, we will take the CPU power cable. If you take this, you can see the CPU cable here. This is the CPU cable. In good branded supplies, all the labels will be mentioned on cable plugs. So basically, we will first route the CPU cable from here, and then we will reinstall the motherboard. Now we will tighten all these 6 screws. First, we start from the bottom. Basically, we installed the power supply first, because it gets a bit bulky, and it becomes difficult to get out of this hole. So we needed to install the power supply first, to take out the cable from here, so we can easily plug the cable here. In this plugs, you will also get to see notches, so align the plugs in correct way. Then plug the cables. After plugging the cables, you will hear a click sound from the plug once the cable is properly seated in place. Our assembly is almost complete. Now we will manage the wires and install the remaining items. So right now, our motherboard is installed. We have moved to the other side of the cabinet. Now, we are going to install the hard disk drive. So you can see here that in this cabinet we get 2 screw-less drive casing. The special thing about these screw-less drive casing is that you don't need any screws for this. You can directly install hard disk in it. Just plug it in here. And from the other side, you need to pull it a little and press it. Just put it back in as it was before, and you can do it easily, and it will lock in its place with a click sound. Now, you will need to manage the remaining cables one by one. So first, we will sort out cables and set aside the cables that we will use. First, we will take the 24-pin cable, which is our largest plug cable. Let's set it aside for now, and we will deal with it later. You will find SATA power cables related to our hard disk. Currently, we are using only one hard disk, so we will use just this one, and we will set the other one aside. And this one is for our fans and RGB lights. Let me show you our Molex fans. These are the Molex cables that will connect here, so we will also have to set the Molex cables aside. And the last one is the PCIe cable that you will see. It will have PCI written on it. This cable is for graphics card to power them. Essentially, in every power supply, you will find this in 6+2 connection, which you can plug in. And these two are what we have on our side. Now we need only one SATA power cable for our hard disk, so I will fold this in a specific way, and the extra length should be packed into it. Alright, you can also use the wires or ties that comes with these to bundle them. So what we have is the extra connectors that we will insert into this, and then we will connect the SATA power plug to our hard disk. You also need to pay attention to the notch when plugging these cables also. So you can see that we have put this. Now we will look at the 24-pin connector here. So I will first move the front panel connectors to the front. Let's move this to the front, so that we can easily route the big 24-pin plug. Now we will take our largest 24-pin cable from this side and insert it here, so that it comes out from front side easily. Later, we will tie these cables once the front side process for all the cables is completed. This is the PCIe cable that we will connect to graphics card. We insert this one also from here underneath holes. Now we have left with Molex cables, so we will connect these to fans and RGB light. When connecting cables, you will find that each connector has its own specific direction to install, so make sure to connect these carefully. One is for our RGB light strip, and the other is for our fan for rest. The remaining cables, we bundle them and insert here, as we don't need these extra cables. Wire management completely depends on how you handle the wire. Now we will turn it back to the front, and see which cable is more suitable to connect where. Now we will connect all the cables to the board one by one. First we'll start with the 24-pin connector. You will also find one notch here. So you can see the notch here on the board's socket as well. You need to fit it in just as it sits correctly. You have to bend it in such a way that it fits into it properly. Pay attention to the notch and make sure it's in the right direction. Now it is plugged. Right now, we have connected the 24-pin cable that we had. Now we will connect the front panel headers of cabinet to the motherboard. To connect the front header, you can use your motherboard's guidebook. If you don't know about the pins, you can refer to the guidebook that comes with the motherboard. I have been doing this for a long time now, so I can do this part very easily without checking the guide. Every motherboard have different positions for this front header ports, so check accordingly and plug all the connectors. While plugging power LED and HDD, LED plugs give attention to positive and negative sides. When you install the USB and HDD audio headers, you will have to keep correct direction of slots. We are almost finished, so we will turn to backside again and make some adjustments. We will do cable management. For cable management, I will use zip ties. You need to pay a little attention to cable management, but the final finish will be much better. Now here, we will do one more thing, the data cable for hard disk. So we will install the data cable now, and then we will need to turn it back again. And that's it, all of our work is done. Now we will cut these extra length of zip ties.
Doesn't matter if it's true.
Now we will turn it to front side again and install our graphics card in the slot. Before that, let's open the cover for the PCI slot.
The world is waiting half a step beyond our door.
The main slot is always the first one, located under the CPU. You should put your graphics card in the first slot. The main slot is where you can place it, and you can use the secondary slots also. But I recommend that you place it in the slot that is closest to the CPU, which is the fastest PCIe slot. Before you put it in the slot, you need to open this lock, and then you should insert your graphics card into the slot in this manner. And as soon as you insert it, you will hear a click sound. Once your graphics card is in, you need to fit it with a screw. While tightening the screw, you need to push the graphics card a little bit upward gently, and then we will secure the PCI bracket cover. Next comes the pin connector for our graphics card. As you can see here, our GPU has an 8-pin connector, so we will just need an 8-pin for this. So here we will use this one. When connecting the plug, you need to pay attention to the notch direction, and as you can see, there is also a notch here. In some cases, it can be in bottom side. So you will need to keep in mind what you have when you're plugging the cable. So we have installed this. From here, we will push the extra wire to back and connect it like this. So assembly is near completed. Now we will turn back once again and fix all the cables. and then we will close the back panel.
I'll see the Stockholm lights, the Stockholm lights, the Stockholm lights. The Stockholm lights.
So now our build has been completed, and as you can see, it is now working perfectly. So this is how you can build your own AMD-based PC very easily. So that's it for this video. If this helps you, then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you have questions, then please ask us in comment section of this video. We will surely help you. Thank you for watching. We will be back with another exciting video. Until then, goodbye and happy gaming.
Say the day with a flick of the wrist. Work together, give each other assists. You don't see me coming, I'ma plot twist. Senses are tingling, we find a villain and get the tag team and them leave if they take it for